Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me again for another Vista Spotlight. Today, I am joined with returning Vista Luis Reyes, who is currently working for Tackle Hunger, the Super Bowl of Caring. He's in his second year as a Vista with HFA, and I believe your first year was through the Houston Food Bank.
Mhm.
Um, so I will let you do your introduction. It's kind of baked into this first question, but how did you discover HFA and what attracted you to becoming a Vista?
Um, so previous to my time with HFA, I had done VISTA for 3 terms already in the past, more than close to a decade ago and whatnot in New Orleans. So after finishing one year job over here with a nonprofit, I wanted to continue looking at stuff here in Houston, and I wanted to put myself again with the nonprofit industry. And I was thinking, well, I had a good experience with AmeriCorps Vista when I was again in New Orleans. So I decided to take a look at what was the Vista landscape out here in Houston. And I came across HFA, and I saw that they had a position available through the Houston Food Bank. So I decided to take it because I had been, with the work that I had done previously with the other organization, I had visited the food bank a couple of times, and I thought it was a wonderful place. So I felt like, hey, that would be naturally a place that I would want to work with or work in.
Right. And actually, I think you did a video tour or something last year, and it kind of blew my mind how big that facility is.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Um, But I mean, you're coming from a place where you're familiar with the AmeriCorps program and Vista generally. But what was kind of the understanding with that first year with HFA? Like we all have these like headings, these titles like volunteer coordinator, capacity building coordinator. What were like the main if you could simplify it to that level, what were kind of the main issue areas or problems that your organization was asking you to kind of help with?
So within the Houston Food Bank, you have a program called Food for Change. And Food for Change consists of 3 pillars. One's community health, the second is higher education, and the third is economic mobility. So my task going in was helping those 3 pillars grow and be able to expand their programming and reach new. Over there, they use the language of neighbors instead of clients. So how do we reach new neighbors? How do we fill in the gaps in the counties that are more rural? The Houston Food Bank serves several counties of more than 15. And while a good percentage of the population is concentrated within Harris and Fort Bend, which are big, urban populations, there's a large rural section. So I was going to I was asked to help them identify organizations that were already out there in the rural landscape that we could tap into to start building partnerships with, or if we had to start afresh.
Wow. Okay. And do you feel like was there like a benchmark? Um, was there, I don't know how to say, I the year is a long and a short period all
Mm.
at the same time for Vista. Um, do you feel like you hit the benchmarks that were kind of presented for to you, or?
Well, initially, there was a set number of new. So let me back a little bit. So for within Food for Change, you also have 2 programs called Food Scholarship and Food RX, and these are programs that are tailored to certain populations. And within the Food for Change program, you have these Food for Change markets that are located throughout the areas that the Houston Food Bank serves. And at the beginning, we had like around 10. Then, due to economic factors, because of the change of the administration and whatnot, and change in partnership goals and things like that, those markets began to drop. And suddenly, I was asked, like, hey, initially, we're going to look for X number of new markets. That had to be scaled down as the food bank had to kind of orient itself towards a new reality of how its budget was going to look like. So that ended up affecting, food for changes plans for the upcoming year and 5 years, 10 years,
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the that's a good example of how um, vistas have to be kind of flexible to the realities that they're presented with. And I think we all like kind of go into it thinking, we want to, we all have our own reasons, but we all want to be helpful to the community and kind of, save the world, kind of to put simply.
yeah.
And and that's a good example of just realities outside of your control.
You
Um,
have to, again, by then it was my fourth term of service, but I mean, you have to, from my experience in AmeriCorps, then also working in other nonprofits outside of AmeriCorps, you learn that you have to be pragmatic.
yeah,
You have to accept that change is going to happen. Things are not always going to go your way, and you just have to go with the flow.
right, right. Do you have I mean, you just described a great example of a difficult situation. Do you have like a moment or an achievement that you're most proud of from your last year of service?
I think a program or a project that I helped create, or actually that I created, even though it seems kind of small, was creating a Google sheet where we can track the distances between uh, Food for Change's partners. So that was divided into tabs that, again, with the three pillars in mind, and then those tabs expanded in other words. But, I was able to lay down the groundwork for them to look at where are partners and where are the food pantries out there that are in good standing with partner services, which is a branch within the Houston Food Bank, and trying to see, okay, once things kind of settle down, once the Houston Food Bank is back to its footing, and we're able to look at a budget that's more concrete, how can we go ahead and elevate some of these partner pantries up to a point that they become food for change markets where participants in food scholarship or food RX could participate in? So I, left with that project there for them to be able to use. One of my coworkers there was able to make it into um, a visual representation through a map. So I
Mhm.
felt I was able to kind of lay down the groundwork for that.
That's awesome. That's a great example of like, I mean, we throw the term capacity building, right?
Yeah.
You
And
created something that,
the funny thing is like I had color coded the distances based, again, like how far they were from each other. So after a while, I just became at first I started referring to it derisively as a rainbow project because like it was just a bunch of colors in front of
yeah.
me, like the cells, right? And then that just became like the name of the project itself, the Rainbow Project.
Cool. That's fitting. Um, well, that sounds really, really commendable. Commendable.
Yeah, and I mean
That sounds like a cool project. Yeah.
yeah, and it was something again, it's something small, and thinking back on it, there was probably another way that you could probably have used AI or other programs to do it more efficiently. But the fact that, something like that wasn't already prepared kind of gave the Food for Change program an idea of like, hey, let's kind of bring all these things together to work towards the common goal.
Right. And I think that's a good example of you left a great tool behind for them to develop and fit their needs, but it
Yeah.
wasn't there before. Um, and so switching gears just a little bit, so you're into another term of service that kind of just got going. Um, can you talk about your new role and if it dovetails at all into your previous experience or what you're working on now?
So my new role with Tackle Hunger, it's a virtual role. So I'm working, remotely. We're meeting through Zoom, through huddles, right?
Hmm.
Slack. And the funny thing is that it's familiar and unfamiliar to me at the same time. So by unfamiliar, I mean like permanently, you know, remote work. The only time that I've kind of experienced this was during the pandemic in 2020, right? With the nonprofit that I was working there for a couple months, we were all remote. Um, so I'm basically used to, being in an office, talking to people, setting up meetings there face to face, right? But the one thing that's very much familiar with working with Tackle Hunger is in the past, outside of Houston Food Bank, and I'll circle back around to explain that, is being in an organization that's more in need of different, like in an organization that's a little bit more bare bones. And you have to kind of jump in and kind of help out with other stuff. Like, I'm doing capacity building, but so, capacity building can mean working on a newsletter now, because we don't have a communications department. And going back to the Houston Food Bank, the Houston Food Bank is a very large organization where you have various departments that can do several things. Unlike previous work that I had done, I didn't have to think about somebody, um, having to write up certain things that I would have to have done, like, grants or anything like that, because there was a department already dedicated to grant writing. So, returning to a more bare bones experience is something that I'm very much used to by now.
Great. Great. I'm sure it's a big change. But there's no short, like you said, there's no shortage, especially when you're a small team,
Yeah.
of things to dip your toe in and like get involved.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I was a little spoiled where, like, at the Houston Food Bank, what do you mean I don't have to create, my own advert,
mhm. Yeah. So there's a lot of space for learning. Um, well, I'm glad to be working with you for another year. I know we have a lot of stuff coming down the pipe for the Vistas and everything that we try to offer as an organization. But with all your institutional wisdom, do you have any tips um, for the incoming class or the incoming group of new Vistas this year?
I think go for it. Go for anything that you want to do that you think can make the most impact within your organization. Don't be afraid of no. And sometimes, even if somebody tells you no, we can't do this or we don't have the money for it, a door closes, another one can open. Go look for an alternative for a funding source, or think outside the box for a way that you can build capacity. A lot of the things that you do within the nonprofit sector just means that you have to think outside the box. And especially if it's your first time outside of like academia or outside of school, right? Whatnot. If it's your first job, don't be afraid to interact with your boss, your coworkers, and just admit, like, if you're having trouble with a project or you're kind of stuck somewhere, collaborate. Collaborate within your own office, or even collaborate if you have other vistas that you can reach out to. It's helpful to network, it's helpful to collaborate, it's helpful to ask questions instead of doing it all by yourself and it blowing up on you at the end, right? Avoid that. Avoid that if you can by just tapping into the resources that are there for you.
I think that's great advice. I think it's an easy pitfall to just walk into something, especially with like the high benchmarks we put in our
Yeah.
VADs and our expectations for the year that you have to walk in knowing the answers. But that's like you
No.
said, that's not the expectation. So the more you
No,
can put
because I
yourself
mean
out.
we could be honest, like at 37 when I started my first Vista term, I was probably 24, mid mid 20s, right? And you come in very much with an idealistic mindset, right? And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not like slamming it, but I think sometimes when you come with that mindset, you want to do it your own because you feel like that's what the call for doing this work is, right? But as you grow into Vistahood, you learn that if you just go purely on idealism, you're going to meet with a lot of resistance or you're going to meet with a lot of heartbreak. So I'm not saying abandon your idealism, but at the same time, be willing to compromise and be willing to look for alternatives to get what you want to do done, if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And we're approaching a weekend, so I hope you have a good weekend. But I look forward, like I said earlier, to continue to work with you and collaborate. And I always look forward to seeing everyone at our Vista events. But thank you for your contribution to your host sites and helping our team with projects like this.
Likewise, thank you so much.